Chapter 1. New Blood, Old Eyes. The sun had barely cleared the tree line, casting long amber light through the reinforced windows of Gunner's office. The walls were lined with maps, weapons racks, and quiet memories, ghosts of campaigns past and warnings for the ones still coming. Gunner stood behind the wide steel desk, scanning logistics reports when the door opened with practiced familiarity. Darren entered first, followed by Command Sergeant Major Holth, DeSera, and Eli, whose bracer gloves flickered faintly as they adjusted to the ambient energy of the room. All of them looked like they'd been up for hours already. They had. "Morning," Darren said, nodding. "Figured we'd brief you before the elves start teaching morning meditation in the motor pool." Gunner grunted. "Wouldn't be the worst thing to happen there." Holth stepped forward, clipboard in hand, posture crisp. Base is fully operational. The 5077th has solidified the perimeter and fallback points. Internal patrols are cycling every 4 hours. Barracks and staging areas are functional and reinforced. "We assigned mixed billets," Darren added. 1 elf per fire team minimum. Integrated housing. No split camps. They eat together, train together, work together. "So far nobody's thrown a punch," Desera said, arms folded. "A few side-eyes in the mess hall. Nothing serious." Eli snorted. "One of the elven engineers asked if MREs was some kind of prison ration. I didn't have the heart to lie." Darren smirked. "I told him they were. Builds character." Holth's voice remained steady. Training schedules are synced. Cultural differences are being smoothed out in real time. No open friction. DeSera stepped closer, dropping a small tablet on Gunner's desk. "Operations grid is clean. Portal traffic is restricted and logged. Security sweeps every 4 hours. No unexpected signals since Rose and Clora departed." Gunner scanned the tablet, then looked up. "Command chain?" "Solid," Holth replied. "Elves are responding to orders from our side without delay. Clora's leadership while in Eldermire helped pave that trust." Eli nodded. "They trust her. That carries weight." Darren leaned back against a cabinet. "So, about the embassy." Gunner's eye narrowed slightly. "What about it?" "Any word yet?" Darren asked. "I mean, they're talking about establishing a full-on diplomatic presence here, not just a barracks tent with prettier drapes." Holth glanced toward the window. "We've got a spot cleared on the southeast ridge. Good sight lines. Near the waterfall and the glade. Seems like the place they'd pick." "No official word yet," Gunner said, "but they'll come. Melorian's smart. He knows this alliance needs roots, not just promises." DeSera gave him a sharp look. "Any concern the locals might push back?" "They will," Gunner replied. "Hardliners won't like seeing elven banners flying next to Earth's, but they'll like being overrun by void-born horrors a hell of a lot less." Silence settled for a moment, one of those heavy ones. Then Eli added softly, "We're building something here, and for once, it might actually last." Gunner didn't respond immediately. He walked to the window watching soldiers, human and elven, run drills below. A pair of wolves flanked one squad, ears perked and watching like sentries born from shadow and instinct. "Get the welcome package ready," he said at last. "When the embassy team arrives, we do it right. Ground tour, not ceremony. Let them see what we bleed for before they start writing policies." Holth nodded. "I'll coordinate security and clear airspace." DeSera tapped the tablet. "And I'll start prepping integration protocols for command access. If they're staying, they'll need to plug into ops." Darren cracked a grin. "I'll teach them how to curse in 6 languages." Eli rolled her eyes. "They already know Darren. That's why some of them don't sleep." Gunner allowed the faintest smirk. Just for a second. Then it was gone. "We don't know how long this quiet will last," he said. "Use it. Build the bones strong." And with that, the pack returned to motion, already halfway to their next orders. Deep beneath the base, in the most secure level of the compound, the portal chamber hummed with quiet energy. 2 elven guards in silver-etched armor stood flanking the archway, their expressions impassive. Across from them, 2 human soldiers from the 5077th, Keller and Rowe, stood equally alert, assault rifles slung across their chests. The tension between the species had faded over the past week, replaced by a disciplined camaraderie born of shared responsibility. The portal shimmered, not with alarm, but with purpose. The light rippled once, controlled, measured, and then settled into a cool radiance as Maelorion stepped through. The Guardian Counselor of Alfheim needed no introduction. His arrival was expected. Tall, composed, and wrapped in travel-worn formal robes lined with sigils of authority, he moved forward without hesitation. A scroll case was tucked beneath one arm, and his staff clicked softly against the stone as he passed. Sergeant Keller straightened. "Sir, General Gunner is waiting upstairs." "I trust the lift is prepared," Maelorion said. "Yes, sir. Escort's ready." Without another word, Maelorion followed the escort detail to the reinforced lift that would carry him to the heart of the facility above. The door opened with a muted chime as Darren looked up from the corner where he was mid-rant about Claura's training regimen. "Speak of the devil," he muttered, straightening. Maelorion stepped into the room, his presence stilling the air with that uniquely elven stillness. Powerful, measured, never overplayed, he greeted each person with a crisp nod. "Alpha, Officer Desera, Command Sergeant Major Holth, Darren, Technomancer, Eli." Gunnar met his gaze evenly. "Didn't expect you in person." Maelorion moved to the central table, unslinging the scroll case and laying the documents out in one practiced motion. Some messages are best delivered by hand. He unrolled the parchment. Detailed architectural schematics marked with Alfheim's seal and Earth coordinates revealed the proposed structure. "The Council has accepted your offer," he announced. "An elven embassy will be constructed on Earth, here, at this compound. A team will arrive within 1 day to begin layout and assessment." CSM Holth studied the map Maelorion had spread across the central table, his calloused finger tapping a marked corner of the southeast ridge. "We'll need to regrade this section before foundation work begins," he said. "It's too steep for stable anchoring. I've got a crew that can handle it in under 12 hours if we start tonight." Maelorion nodded. "Acceptable. Our anchor team will begin laying magical baselines as soon as the terrain is secured. The embassy must be more than symbolic. It must endure." Eli leaned in, scanning the arcane annotations. "You're using mirrored node glyphs for stabilization?" "Yes," she made a face. "I'll want to check your alignment rituals. Earth's ley lines don't sync the same way. If this place implodes into a crater because someone misread a shift pattern—" "It won't," Maelorion said with an edge of dry amusement. "But your input is noted." "Noted and necessary," Eli shot back, but her smirk betrayed no malice. Darren, arms crossed and leaning against the wall, spoke up. "What about living quarters? Are they planning to bunk on base or build a diplomatic wing off-site?" "They will reside within the new structure," Maelorion said. "There will be chambers for the ambassadorial corps, staff, and security. However, all diplomatic activities are to remain transparent and shared with Earth Command." CSM gave Gunnar a glance. "Might be worth assigning a liaison team, not just for courtesy, prevent misunderstandings." Desera nodded. "I can build a rotation schedule, multilingual personnel, a few with enchantment clearance. I'll handpick them." "Make sure they understand who they're reporting to," Gunnar added. "They will," Desera replied. Maelorion turned to Gunnar, his expression unreadable. "Your operation here has exceeded our expectations." Gunnar didn't react. "Wasn't for show." "No," Maelorion said. "I see that now." He paused, then added, "There's talk within the council, low murmurs, nothing formal yet, that this embassy may become the first of several across Earth. A precedent." Darren whistled low. "You planning to franchise the Elves?" "Not my decision," Maelorion said. "But if we want to survive what's coming, cooperation cannot be a novelty." CSM folded his arms. "What is coming?" Maelorion hesitated, just slightly. Then there are forces shifting beneath the realms. The child of Ultranacious is not the only concern. There are stirrings in the borderlands, rifts we thought sealed, and whispers from the Shadowfall grow louder. The air thickened. Gunner's jaw tightened. If you've got intel, I want it shared with Echo. It will be, Mylorian said. In full. For a moment the room was silent. Then Gunner reached down, pressed a finger to the plans, and said, "Then let's build it fast." The door clicked softly behind them as the others filed out. Desiree last, giving Gunner a brief nod before vanishing into the hallway. Only Mylorian remained. Gunner moved without speaking, crossing to the small cabinet tucked beside his weapons rack. He retrieved a plain glass bottle, half full with something amber and sharp, and 2 thick-bottomed tumblers. He poured without asking. Mylorian watched in silence, eyes thoughtful. When Gunner handed him the glass, the elf took it without ceremony and let the quiet stretch between them. Finally, Gunner spoke, low and deliberate. "Always wondered something," he said, turning toward the window but not looking out. "About guardians, their oaths." Mylorian said nothing, just waited. "What does the oath actually bind them to?" Gunner asked. "I've seen what they do, what they don't do, but no one ever says it outright. Is it just neutrality? Balance?" Mylorian's glass paused halfway to his lips. "That's part of it," he said slowly. "But it's more than neutrality. The oath is a promise, not to power, but to perspective. A guardian must see the whole board and refuse to move a single piece for personal gain, not for love, not for vengeance, not even for justice." Gunner turned now, his voice edged. "So if someone they care about is in danger, they do nothing." Mylorian's gaze met his, and something ancient flickered behind it. Weariness. Memory. "They feel it," he said. "Every cut, every loss. But they are bound to hold the line, even when it bleeds them. Especially then." Gunner stepped forward, glass untouched. "And if they break it?" "The council intervenes," Mylorian said. "They are recalled, stripped, cast out, or worse." The silence between them deepened. Mylorian studied him for a long moment, then added quietly, carefully, "But the oath isn't absolute. Guardians may walk the edge. They may care. They may feel things they are forbidden to act upon, until the balance itself tips." Gunner's voice dropped. "And who decides that?" Mylorian didn't blink. "Sometimes. The world does." He took a slow sip, then said with pointed weight, "A guardian is not forbidden to love, Alpha. They are forbidden to act on it before the time is right. There is a difference." Gunner looked away, jaw tight. Mylorian stepped closer, his voice now low, measured, but with a gravity that felt older than the war between realms. "If you force her hand," he said, "you may cost her more than her title. But if you wait, if you trust the current, what must come will come." And for the briefest moment, the air felt heavy with meaning neither man dared speak aloud. The prophecy pulsed in the back of Mylorian's mind like a distant storm, but aloud all he said was, "Guardians do not walk alone by choice, Gunner. They do it because they must, until the storm calls them forward." Gunner turned the talisman in his fingers, the smooth elven crystal catching the morning light. He didn't have to explain it, Mylorian had seen it before. Gunner's voice was low. "She gave me this, said it would let her reach me, no matter the realm. No one else carries one like it." Mylorian stared at the talisman, then lifted his glass and took a measured sip before answering. "She shouldn't have given it," he said calmly. "Not by the laws of her station. It crosses a line most guardians fear to even approach." "But you already knew that," Gunner said. Mylorian met his gaze. "I did." He set his glass down. "I've seen the way she looks at you, Gunner. In battle, in stillness, when she thinks no one is watching." His voice didn't soften, but it didn't harden either. "I've seen the way you look back." The words lingered. Gunnar didn't respond. He didn't need to. "You both carry the same burden," Mylorian said. "Not just duty, each other. And you both refuse to speak it aloud, as if that will keep it from being real." Gunnar's jaw flexed. "She has an oath." "She does," Mylorian agreed. "And yet she chose to fight beside you. She defied the council once. She gave you that talisman. Not because she was careless, but because she had to. Because some part of her already crossed the line." He paused. "And I did not stop her." Gunnar looked up sharply. "I knew," Mylorian said. "And I let it pass. Because sometimes balance does not come from restraint. It comes from honouring what the world needs, even if the laws lag behind." The room was silent again, heavy with truths unspoken for too long. Mylorian stepped closer, his voice dropping to something rare, personal. "She is not weak, Gunnar. She is not blind, and she does not give her heart without cause. If you are waiting for a sign, this may be it." Then, almost gently, "But tread carefully. The storm hasn't yet crested. If either of you breaks too soon, the council will come down on her harder than any enemy ever could." Gunnar exhaled slowly, his fingers closed around the talisman. "Then I'll wait," he said, "until the balance tips." Mylorian nodded, his expression unreadable, but not unkind. "Good. Just make sure you're there to catch her. When it does." Mylorian finished his drink in silence, then gave Gunnar a final measured nod. No more words were needed. He turned and exited the office, robes trailing behind him with quiet grace, leaving Gunnar alone with the pulse of the talisman in his palm and the weight of a future that hadn't been written yet. Outside, the sounds of training resumed. The wolves stirred. The Embassy Foundation would be marked before sundown. And far across the realms, one guardian's heart still beat in sync with his own. Gunnar looked down at the glowing stone, faint, steady, waiting. Chapter 2. Shadows in the marble hall. The portal flared once behind him, sealing the passage between realms. Mylorian stepped into the high chamber of Alfheim's guardian's sanctum, its walls etched with runes so old, even he had forgotten some of their meanings. The silence here was absolute. No soldiers, no politics, just the weight of millennia pressing down in stillness. He stood still for a long moment, letting the calm sink in. But Gunnar's voice still echoed in his mind. What does the oath actually bind them to? Mylorian's mind drifted to the talisman, the one Eliana had given him. Not just a charm, a connection, a choice. Too personal, too real. She had crossed the line, if only by inches, and Gunnar had noticed. Worse, he understood. He walked the long corridor to the crystal chamber where private summons could be made without triggering full council alert. He placed a single runestone into the recessed pedestal. Only 2 others in existence matched its resonance. They would know to come. The chamber was shaped like an eye, polished stone and woven light making it shimmer even without torches. At its centre sat 3 high-backed chairs. Mylorian waited in the first, hands folded, until the doors opened and the other 2 entered. Councillor Valith, tall, silver-haired, more mystic than soldier. Her eyes were clouded, yet she saw more than most. Councillor Thandor, older, sterner, clad in gold-hemmed robes, the historian and enforcer of the old ways. Both took their places without needing instruction. Mylorian began. "There's been movement on Earth. The embassy is proceeding. The pack is stabilizing." Thandor grunted. "Then why the private summons?" Valith leaned forward, head tilted. "Because of her." Mylorian nodded once. "Eliana has given her talisman to the Alpha of Earth's pack." Thandor's eyes narrowed. "Unwise. That alone could call her standing into question." "It's more than that," Mylorian continued. "The Alpha Gunnar. Asked me directly about the guardian oath, what it forbids, what it allows. Valeth's lips parted faintly. He knows. Melorian didn't answer. He didn't need to. They have not acted, he said, but they are no longer pretending not to feel. The lines are blurring. Thandor stood, pacing. Then she must be recalled, before this becomes... The storm, Melorian interrupted quietly. Silence fell. Valeth's expression shifted. You believe it has begun? Melorian met their eyes one after the other. I do. Thandor looked away. We cannot interfere. The prophecy forbids it. I'm not proposing interference, Melorian said. But we must be ready. If this is the moment the realms begin to converge, if Earth, Alfheim, and the bloodlines of old are coming together, then we cannot treat this like a mere political entanglement. Veleth nodded. Let it unfold, but watch closely. Watch her. Watch him. Mylorian sat back in his chair. If they fall too soon, the storm will consume us all. But if they hold, it may be the only thing that saves us. No vote was taken. No formal decree passed. But in that room, in that moment, the fate of two hearts, and possibly the realms themselves, shifted one step closer to the edge. The wind whispered through the high glade above Alfheim's southern cliffs, cool, quiet, laced with the scent of starlight blossoms. Here the stone pathways curved through ancient trees older than recorded history, their roots humming faintly with the natural magic of the realm. Eliana Vale sat cross-legged beneath a slender silverleaf tree, her staff resting across her lap. The runes along its length pulsed slowly, echoing her breathing, focused but strained. She didn't look up when she heard the soft steps behind her. You don't usually come to this part of the cliffs, she said. Melorian stopped a few paces away. Not unless I have reason. She opened her eyes, the violet glow beneath her lashes dimming. So, is this official? Are you here to reprimand me again? He took a slow breath. No. That made her look up. Eliana studied him for a moment, her guard still up. Then what? I spoke with Gunnar, he said simply. She stilled. He asked me about the guardian oath, Melorian continued. What we can do, what we cannot. Her jaw clenched. Of course he did. I did not give him your name, Melorian said. I didn't need to. She turned away, her voice bitter. Let me guess. You told him I'm bound by duty, that I'm forbidden from feeling anything inconvenient. Melorian took a step closer. Number I told him the truth, that guardians may love, but they must not act before the balance permits it. She laughed, short and harsh. And when does balance ever permit anything, Melorian? When it's safe, when the council's not watching, or when it's already too late? He was quiet. You said once I was your finest student, she said, standing now, staff still in hand. Was that a lie? Or did you just mean I was the best at obeying? His eyes softened. I meant it, he said. And I meant it when I told the council to let you fight, to let you live. She looked away, gripping her staff tighter. They won't understand. If they find out about him, about what I've done, they'll strip me. They might, he admitted. Or they might try to use it. Twist your bond into something they can control. Or punish. A long pause. I didn't plan this, she said quietly. I didn't want it. But he sees me, not as a guardian, not as a weapon. Just me. I know, Mylorian said. That caught her off guard. I've seen the way you look at each other, he continued. You carry each other in silence. That's what frightens them most. She exhaled. So what do I do? Melorian stepped forward, close now, his voice gentler than she'd heard in years. You hold the line until the storm calls you forward, and when it does, you do not run from it. She looked up at him, something breaking behind her eyes. And if it tears everything apart? Then let it, he said. But don't let it tear you apart first. For the first time in weeks, her grip on the staff loosened. The breeze shifted, stirring the leaves above them as starlight shimmered between the branches. Eliana lowered her staff. She didn't speak, didn't thank him, didn't promise anything. But Malorian didn't need words. Not now. He watched as she turned back toward the edge of the glade, her silhouette framed by the vast expanse of sky stretching beyond the cliffs. The wind tugged gently at her robes, and the runes along her staff flickered once, soft, uncertain, and deeply alive. For the first time in a long while, she didn't retreat into duty. She just stood still. And as Malorian quietly walked away, he left her to the silence, to the weight of the unspoken, and to the decision only she could make when the storm finally reached her door. Chapter 3. First Stone. The portal chamber beneath the workshop pulsed with gentle light, its warded arch glowing steady in the quiet. This was no ceremonial threshold. It was a secure gateway, shielded in stone, monitored by magic and steel, and watched by guards loyal to the pack. Gunnar stood at the edge of the threshold, arms folded across his broad chest. Darren leaned beside the doorframe, shotgun slung and body language relaxed, but only just. On the opposite side, DeSera checked her tablet, finalizing patrol rotations. And Sophia Delacroix, suit immaculate, expression cool, waited in silence, lips tight, as the portal shimmered to full. Then came the arrival. Silver light curled inward as the veil parted, and Mylorion stepped through, staff in hand, expression composed. His long coat of elven weave flickered with spell thread, but the weight he carried wasn't decorative. Beside him walked Eliana Vale, her staff tucked to her side, robes formal yet practical, her face unreadable. She didn't scan the room for hostility. She scanned it for balance. Behind them followed 4 elves, ambassadors, architects, and a record keeper whose ink-stained hands gripped a satchel that likely held the next century's worth of negotiation parchment. Gunnar stepped forward. "Welcome back," he said. Mylorian nodded. "Alpha." Eliana held Gunnar's gaze for a single breath longer than necessary, then dipped her chin slightly. Formal, controlled, but there was meaning behind it. Sophia spoke next. "Counselor Mylorian, Guardian Vale, on behalf of the United States." "This isn't US land," Gunnar cut in calmly but firmly. "The ridge belongs to the pack. I offered it under the mutual aid charter I negotiated, not a lease, a gift. And it stays under shared jurisdiction." Sophia blinked, more at the interruption than the statement. "Still, the embassy is here because of her," Gunnar said, nodding to Eliana, "and because of a war we almost lost without help. The council knows where we stand, and so do I." Mylorion's lip twitched, barely, but Gunnar saw it. Approval, not amusement. Darren coughed behind him and muttered, "Damn right." Eliana stepped forward now, voice even. "The structure will be neutral by design. No warded dominance, no hidden sigils. Echo and Alfheim will both have access to the ley line core. Transparency is part of the agreement." DeSera looked up from her datapad. "You'll have shared access to our emergency channels. Security's integrated. You try to pull rank, it pings both sides." One of the elves behind Mylorion arched a brow at that. Eliana didn't flinch. Sophia recovered her poise. "Then let me rephrase. The US government recognizes the significance of this partnership. We are here to support and observe the construction of a cooperative future." Gunnar gave her a long look. "Good," he said. "Then observe." He turned to Mylorion. "You'll want to see the ridge. The crew's finished prep last night. It's ready." Mylorian gave a single nod. "Then let's set the first stone." As the lift hummed upward, bringing them toward the ridge where ancient trees now watched over new beginnings, Gunnar felt the weight of it all. New allies, stone and ash, and something between Eliana's silence and his pulse that hadn't settled since the moment she stepped through the gate. The upper compound stirred with life as the lift doors slid open, revealing the late afternoon sun casting golden light across the ridge. Echo Division personnel and elven artisans moved with coordinated precision, marking ley line intersections, running conduit, adjusting structural plans with both runes and rebar. It was the kind of joint effort that once would have been unimaginable. Wolves paced silently at the perimeter. One of them, Alpha, lifted his head the moment Gunnar emerged, his gaze locking with his bonded without hesitation. He didn't bark, he didn't run, he simply watched, guarding, knowing. Mylorion stepped onto the ridge, his boots crunching lightly against newly laid gravel. Aliena moved beside him, her gaze sweeping across the construction layout with the clinical eye of someone who had walked battlefields and diplomatic halls alike. "The preparations are acceptable," Mylorion said after a long moment, "and the site, strong. Your people have done well." "We didn't build it for beauty," Gunnar replied. "We built it to last." Mylorion gave a faint nod. "That is exactly why it will." The group reached the centre of the cleared foundation space, where a broad rune circle had been traced in glowing sigils, half etched with Echo Division's angular battleglyphs, half curved in flowing elven script. Mylorion turned to Gunnar. "The first stone," he said, "is being carved now from the eastern face of Mount Sirael, one of Alfheim's sacred peaks. It has not been touched in centuries. We are cutting it by hand, in silence. No enchantments, no machines." Gunnar's expression didn't shift, but his jaw ticked once. He understood what that meant. "You're not just giving us a piece of your land," he said. "You're giving us something sacred." "We are giving you presents," Mylorion replied. "A fragment of our realm, carried here in trust. When it is set, the embassy will not simply represent Alfheim. It will be of Alfheim." Aliena stepped forward. "And it will be set alongside stone from this realm, cut from the river bend just beyond the waterfall, where your people made their first stand." Gunnar nodded slowly. "So, the foundation will carry both battles and memory." Eliana met his eyes. "Yes, and that's what gives it weight." Sophia stepped in now, eyes narrowed. "And magically speaking, is there any risk in binding two materials from different realms? I've seen unstable resonance cause cascade failures in—" "You won't see it here," Eli said as she approached from the west path, goggles pushed up, faint arcane dust still clinging to her gloves. "I already ran the overlays. The ley line frequencies are compatible. The key is the way we anchor them. No dominance, just mutual resonance. It'll hold." Sophia looked like she had more to say but thought better of it. She gave a stiff nod and made a note on her datapad. Mylorion continued, voice calm but firm. "At twilight we will lay the arcane lattice. That is when this site begins to change, not in the light, not in the dark, in the between." "And the first stone?" Gunnar asked. "We'll arrive at first light," Eliana answered. "Two soldiers, one Echo, one Elven, will carry it to the heart of the circle. Together, no ceremony, no speech, just placement." Gunnar glanced toward the edge of the field, where Alpha now sat, watching like a black statue of vigilance and instinct. "We don't need speeches," Gunnar said. "We just need it to hold." A breeze picked up across the ridge, carrying the scent of pine, steel, and the faint burn of runefire. Somewhere below, the river roared against stone. For the first time it felt real. Not a promise, not a proposal. A foundation. As the preparations along the ridge settled into a steady rhythm, Darren stepped in beside Mylorion and gave a casual nod toward the slope trail below. "If you've got a few minutes, Counselor, I'd like to show you Base X. It's where the real elbow grease is happening." Mylorion glanced once to Eliana. She gave him a subtle nod, staying in place. "I will join you," he said. Darren looked to the others, Desiree, Eli, the elven architects, and 2 aides from Mylorian's detail. Let's go. I'll walk you through the temporary command and integration layout. Gunnar, still standing near the ley line marking stones, didn't move. I'll stay here, he said without explanation. Darren raised a brow but didn't push. Copy that. We'll be back up before nightfall. As the group descended the slope, the ridge behind them grew quieter, until only the hum of the evening breeze and the faint scuff of boots against packed earth remained. At the foot of the ridge, spread across a levelled field once used for vehicle testing, a sprawling system of modular tents and prefab command units had taken shape, Base X. The structures were matte grey and enchantment reinforced. Most bore the Echo Division Wolf insignia, though newer sections showed banners from Alfheim and the 5077th. Solar-fed arc lights glowed faintly in the fading light, while scent canisters along the perimeter kept local predators away. Darren led Maelorion straight to the largest centre tent. Inside, it buzzed with activity. Digital maps overlaid with rune projections, joint personnel tracking rotations, and comm feeds linking to Eldemire, Concordia, and beyond. A tall, calm figure stepped forward to meet them, Lieutenant Colonel Rawls, commander of the 5077th. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing direct but diplomatic. Councillor Maelorion, Rawls said, offering a firm handshake. Welcome to Base X. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rawls. We've been expecting you. Maelorion returned the gesture with a respectful nod. Your reputation precedes you, Colonel. Standing just behind him, C.S.M. Holth gave a crisp nod of his own. Councillor, good to have you on the ground. Darren stepped in. Holth's been running integration at the platoon level. He's the reason we haven't had anyone try to stab their bunkmate over rations or ritual space. Holth didn't smile. We set shared rotations, mixed language drills and buddy teams. Every human fire team has an elf partner, and vice versa. Maelorion moved deeper into the tent, taking in the battle boards, equipment schematics, and open channels. One monitor displayed live portal status across the growing nexus. This is far more than an embassy, Maelorion said. It's a relay hub, Darren confirmed. Once these portals are finished, this base won't just support Earth's security, it'll be the linchpin of inter-realm response. Maelorion folded his hands behind his back, and the trust required to share this level of access wasn't given lightly, Lieutenant Colonel Rawls replied. But we've bled together. That counts for more than doctrine. As they continued the tour, Maelorion observed the tents housing mixed platoons, mess lines with both human and elven rations available, and open sparring pits where training continued even now under the fading sky. This, Maelorion said, is how alliances endure. Holth nodded once. Not on banners, on beds, meals, orders. Maelorion stopped at one of the tent flaps, watching as an Echo Division corporal practiced knife drills with an elven scout. Their movements were fluid, mirrored, different styles, same rhythm. Then he turned to Darren. Tell the Alpha this base will be remembered. I'll let him know, Darren said with a grin, but he probably already smelled your mood an hour ago. Back on the ridge, the sky had darkened to violet. Gunnar stood alone near the marking stones. Aeliana waited a short distance away, arms folded, her silhouette etched against the fading light. They were alone now, and the first stone had yet to arrive. The ridge was quiet now. The last of the workers had cleared out, their voices and footfalls fading down the trail. The air had shifted, cooler still, caught somewhere between the last gold of day and the approaching hush of twilight. Gunnar stood near the ley line markers, arms crossed, his eyes on the spot where the cornerstone would be laid come dawn. Alpha had moved off into the trees, sensing something unspoken passing between his bonded and the guardian who remained. Aeliana stood 10 paces away, the wind tugging lightly at her robes, her staff resting against one shoulder. She wasn't looking at him, but she wasn't looking away either. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Gunnar broke the silence. You didn't have to stay. Eliana's voice was soft, precise. Neither did you. He nodded once. Fair. More silence. She turned slightly, studying the ridgeline, the carved circle, the raw edge of new beginnings. It's strange, she said, to build something like this. Not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. Gunnar shifted, the gravel crunching faintly beneath his boots. Doesn't mean it won't be targeted. No, she agreed, but for now it's still untouched. Her voice trailed off, and again the quiet stretched between them, full of everything they weren't saying. Gunnar looked down at the talisman around his neck. It still glowed faintly when she was near, even if he tried not to look at it. Melorian talked to you? She nodded. He told me what he told you. More or less. And? I told him the truth, she said simply. That I didn't plan this, that I didn't want it. She finally turned fully to face him. But I do feel it. Gunnar held her gaze. His voice was quiet. Yeah, I know. A flicker of something passed between them. Honest, raw, real. And I know what it could cost you, he added. Eliana's expression faltered for a moment, then reset, too fast. You shouldn't have to carry that. I already do. They stood like that, neither closing the distance but no longer drifting apart. Finally, Eliana looked away, not out of shame but out of discipline. We don't have to pretend anymore, she said, but we still can't act. Not yet. Gunnar's jaw flexed. He nodded. So we wait. A soft breeze stirred the trees. The runes along the ground shimmered faintly, catching the first hints of starlight. I hate waiting, she whispered. I've waited my whole life, he said. And in that moment, the silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was sacred. Eliana turned away from the ley line circle, her expression unreadable now, like she'd folded the moment back into herself. Gunnar watched her for a second longer, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small canteen. He took a sip, then offered it. She didn't take it, but she didn't walk away either. After a pause, he said, You hungry? That caught her off guard. She blinked. Excuse me? Bianca's put together something in the mess tent, he said, nodding toward the slope. Nothing formal, just her way of marking the occasion. Eliana hesitated, then gave the faintest smile, one of the rare, quiet ones that didn't reach her lips, but softened the sharpness in her eyes. I remember her stew, she said. She made it during the siege at dusk point. She still talks about how you went back for seconds, Gunnar replied. Eliana's head tilted. So did Melorian. Yeah, but you smiled after, he said. That earned a faint, real flicker of amusement. He turned toward the trail, motioning for her to follow. Come on. She'll take it personal if we're late. Eliana glanced once more at the unfinished circle, the stones not yet set, and the line between realms that waited for the storm. Then she stepped forward, matching his pace. And together they walked down the ridge toward the smell of fire, food, and something that, just for tonight, felt like peace. Chapter 4. Firelight and Fennel. The canvas walls of the mess hall glowed gold from within, backlit by arc lanterns and heating stones. The space wasn't elegant, just folding tables, benches, and 2 long buffet lines, but it radiated life. Voices overlapped in different languages, laughter burst from one corner, and the clatter of metal trays echoed off tent fabric. At one end, Bianca moved like a general in her kitchen-black apron, issuing quiet commands to a pair of KitchenAids as she ladled stew into bowls. A slow-cooked blend of venison, potatoes, and wild herbs simmered with just a hint of fennel, a trick she'd picked up from an elven cook in Eldermire last spring. Don't drown the bread, Morales, she barked as a soldier dropped a ladle of gravy. It's a dip, not a damn baptism. Morales muttered an apology and kept moving. On the other side of the tent, Lieutenant Colonel Rawls sat beside Councillor Melorian. The 2 men engaged in quiet conversation, over a shared platter of sliced root bread and roast root beast. Rawls listened carefully. Melorian ate sparingly, but never once insulted the food. CSM Holt stood posted near the tent's entrance, watchful but relaxed. Eli and Darren had claimed a small table with a pair of elven engineers and were halfway through an argument about whether ley line tuning should involve protein-based reagents. Desera leaned against a tent pole nearby, sipping hot cider, eyes sweeping the crowd like a hawk on Overwatch. Then the flap at the entrance stirred, and Gunnar stepped through. Conversation dimmed just slightly, not in fear but in reflex. He didn't bark orders, he didn't carry a clipboard. But when the Alpha entered a room, people noticed. Beside him walked Eliana, her presence equally commanding but in a different way. Where Gunnar carried the weight of wars fought, Eliana walked like she'd seen empires rise and fall, and survived both. Bianca spotted them immediately. "You're late." Gunnar raised a brow. "You send someone up that mountain to fetch us." "I sent Stu," Bianca replied. "It'd have found you eventually." Eliana actually smiled. Bianca handed them each a bowl. No tray, no fuss. Roasted root, wild fennel, goat cheese crumbles. And yes, I made enough for elven metabolisms. "Thank you," Eliana said genuinely. Bianca waved it off. "Don't thank me till dessert." As the two moved deeper into the tent, the crowd gradually resumed its rhythm. Soldiers slid down to make room. An elf who had once glared across the briefing table at Desera now offered Gunnar a seat beside him without hesitation. No speeches, no formal welcome, just quiet respect. And for the first time in days, it didn't feel like humans and elves. It felt like a unit. Eliana took her seat beside Gunnar and carefully broke a slice of root bread in half. Across from them, Melorion watched and smiled. The warmth of the stew settled low in Gunnar's gut, comforting in a way he didn't know he needed. The noise of the tent had grown lively again. Plates scraped clean, mugs refilled, and laughter occasionally rising from the far side where Darren was reenacting something with dramatic hand motions and an empty ladle. Gunnar leaned back slightly, eyes scanning the room. His room now, his people. Elves and humans seated elbow to elbow, no blood drawn, no banners raised, just food and firelight. He caught Mylorion's eye across the table. After a long moment, he asked, "Where's the first blade these days?" The question was casual. The weight behind it was not. Melorion raised one elegant brow. "Resting in the Hall of Records, beneath the archive." Gunnar gave a dry nod. "Figured you'd keep it on display. Maybe lean it on the council table just for effect." That earned a glint of amusement from the old elf. "I've considered it. Often. Especially when dealing with certain council factions." Eliana, seated between them, didn't quite smile, but her eyes flicked upward knowingly. Melorion continued, voice dry with quiet humour. "The fight against the warlock on the cliffs of Murkdusk was easier than 3 hours of procedural debate over portal security protocols." Gunnar chuckled low. "We've all got our battles." Melorion sipped his tea. "Indeed, some simply wear robes instead of armour." A brief silence passed. Companionable now, not awkward. The kind that exists between those who've stood in the ruins and still know how to appreciate a good meal. Then Melorion added quietly, "But should the time come, Alpha, the first blade can be drawn again." Gunnar looked at him, steady. "Let's hope it doesn't." "But prepare as though it will," Melorion said, setting his cup down. Across the mess tent, a wolf barked once in the distance, short, sharp, almost amused. Alpha had returned. The mess tent had thinned. Plates scraped clean, cups drained, and voices faded to a warm murmur as soldiers and elves trickled into the adjacent lounge space. A repurposed intel tent, strung with soft rune lanterns, space heaters, and enough worn cushions to collapse a battalion. A few wolves lay sprawled near the entry flap, tails twitching, content, and half asleep. Inside, the atmosphere was lighter. No rank, no mission briefings, no pressure. Just the afterglow of shared food, a quiet fire pit, and a slow night ahead. Eli was perched on an overturned crate, tinkering with a glowing arkstone while muttering about resonance drift. DeSera sipped a drink in silence, her back against a supply locker, one leg stretched out in full sniper's sprawl. Darren, true to form, had found the most structurally questionable recliner in the tent, a stack of bundled ration boxes and 2 dented helmets, and declared it optimal. He was currently holding court with 3 Echo soldiers and 1 elf, delivering what could only be described as a dramatically exaggerated reenactment of the time he accidentally tackled a barghest through a stained glass window because the idiot didn't believe in doors. Eliana and Gunnar entered last, still carrying the quiet gravity of the ridge with them. But even they relaxed as the warmth of the tent settled around their shoulders. Across the room, Mylarion sat in a chair too plain for someone his age and station, sipping something that steamed faintly with herbal sharpness. He said little, just watched. Darren threw a mock salute toward Desira's mug. Tell me the council wouldn't move faster if we strapped half of them to Eli's discharge coils and gave them 30 seconds to pick a side. Eli didn't even look up. You say that, like I haven't already designed the prototype. The soldiers laughed. Even the elf beside Darren cracked a grin. Then came the voice from the corner. Cool, measured. You might be pleased to know, Darren. Your phrase has entered official council record. The room stilled slightly, not tense, just surprised. Everyone turned toward Malorian, who remained perfectly composed, cup in hand. Darren blinked. Wait, what phrase? Malorian met his gaze evenly. Bite me. Beat. It proved useful. Eli choked on her cider. Desira sat bolt upright. One of the elves just whispered, What? Darren stared like someone had swapped his boots for relics. You're messing with me. Malorian took another sip. I assure you, I am not. Eliana, bless her composure, pressed a hand to her mouth to hide the widening smirk. Gunnar said nothing, but his eye narrowed in a way that said, this is going to be remembered. Darren sat up slowly. So, let me get this straight. You, Maelorian, High Counselor, wielder of the First Blade, arbiter of realm stability, you told the council to bite me? Maelorian tilted his head, not in those precise words. Darren exhaled. Good. I used all 4 translations, Mylarion said flatly. The tent erupted. Laughter rippled through the lounge, rising like steam off stone, easy, genuine, and unexpected. Even the elves chuckled softly, exchanging wide-eyed glances as if the very idea of a High Counselor using Darren's words had upended 100 years of protocol. Mylorian simply sipped his tea, unmoved, which only made it funnier. Darren leaned back in his precarious throne of helmets and crates, arms folded behind his head, a smug grin spreading ear to ear. Well, he said, surveying the room with mock gravitas, I guess that makes me culturally significant. Eli snorted. DeSera muttered, Maker help us. A few soldiers tried to clap, failed, and knocked over a mug. The sound faded slowly, falling into that golden hour silence that follows true camaraderie, when the air still hums with warmth and nobody wants to break it. Near the tent wall, Gunnar looked across at Eliana. She wasn't laughing anymore, but her eyes still danced with the tail end of it. When she met his gaze, the mirth faded, just slightly, leaving something else in its place. Understanding, timing, restraint, and something just beyond reach. Gunnar held it for a breath longer than he meant to, then looked away. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere, distant footsteps crunched toward the main path, but inside the tent, everything held. Just long enough for Darren to ruin it. Hey, Maelorian, he called. The councillor turned. Darren grinned wider. Next time you tell the council to bite you, Just remember who said it first. Chapter 5. Dawnstone. The last of the laughter was still curling at the edges of the lounge tent when the flap stirred. A sudden chill swept in on the wind, crisp and clean, carrying the scent of moss, steel and something older, something high-born and wild. Then she stepped in. Clara Phelan, still in travel-worn gear, dust clinging to the hem of her elven-patterned cloak, rifle slung across her back beside her staff of light. Her expression was sharp but steady, calm in a way that said she'd ridden through darkness and left it chasing behind her. At her side padded Omega, half-dire wolf, half-grey, leaner than Alpha but growing fast, his storm-pale eyes flicking across the room. The room silenced in waves. Clara gave a single nod to Malorian, then to Gunnar. "The cornerstone is here," she said simply. "It waits." Omega sat beside her, posture straight, ears forward. Malorian stood without a word. Eliana rose quietly beside him, as did Gunnar. At the rear of the room, Sophia closed her tablet and stood as well, expression composed, though her gaze lingered just a second longer on the wolf. Darren muttered, "Perfect timing. Just when I was about to become a cultural relic." Clara didn't look at him. "You already are." The group exited into the cold, violet hour before dawn. The entire camp seemed to shift as word passed. Elves adjusting their cloaks, soldiers straightening their jackets, murmurs spreading through the tents. A path had already been cleared through the ridge, glowing faintly with arc-light lanterns and rune marks etched in twin languages. At the centre of it all, flanked by 2 elven stone-bearers and a pair of echo soldiers in full gear, rested a slab of white-veined granite, roughly carved but perfectly balanced. It glowed faintly from within. Alfheim stone, pulsing with quiet memory. Opposite it, waiting to be joined, lay a darker, earth-cut block. Riverstone from the workshop valley, strong, grounded, etched by human hands. They would meet at the centre of the rune circle. And there, all stood waiting. Mylorian, for the memory of the past. Eliana, for the balance of the present. Gunnar, for the defence of the future. And Sophia, for the sovereignty of the realm they all stood on. The cornerstone would be placed not with a hammer, but with hands. 4 pairs. Together. And from that union, a foundation. The ridge. Cornerstone ceremony. The pre-dawn light crept across the ridge in cold silver tones, painting the ley line markers and unfinished stone walls in soft blues and greys. Lanterns strung along the pathway glowed faintly, leading toward the raised centre of the compound where the circle had been prepared. 2 blocks stood side by side, not yet joined, the sacred white granite from Mount Sirael, etched with runes of memory and presence, pulsing faintly with Alfheim's lifeblood. And the riverstone of earth, dark and solid, quarried from the workshop valley where Echo Division had first taken root. The gathered stood in silence. 5,077th soldiers stood at attention in clean uniforms, weapons slung respectfully. Elven artisans in ceremonial garb lined the east edge, heads bowed slightly. Wolves formed a crescent behind the assembly, Alpha, Beta, and Omega, seated as one. Then the 4 stepped forward. Malorian, the oldest voice in the room, placed his hand on the Alfheim stone. Eliana, his former student, placed hers beside his, fingers splayed with quiet grace. Gunnar, the Alpha who had bled for every inch of peace, laid his hand on the earthstone. Sophia, polished and unreadable, placed hers opposite his, her fingers brushing the carved seal of the United States etched into one side. Together the 4 pressed inward. The runes ignited, soft, not blinding. A pulse of unity, light flowing from one stone to the other. The crack between them vanished. A single foundation stood. For Alfheim. For Earth. A hush held for several breaths. Then Clara stepped forward, staff in hand, Omega at her side. "Let it be written," she said. "This is where the realms begin again." And the wolves howled once, low, mournful, and proud. A hush lingered in the cold morning air. The light from the fused stone flickered once, then settled, not fading but embedding itself into the earth, into the bones of the mountain, into memory. No one moved at first. Then a hand struck a chest plate, one of the elven soldiers, offering a silent salute. Another mirrored it, then a third. Across the ridge, elven artisans bent their heads, not in subservience, but in deep, cultural reverence. Mylorian stepped back, his palm still faintly glowing from the rune resonance. He looked older for a moment, not in weariness, but in the weight of memory. Aeliana exhaled not quite a sigh and met Gunner's gaze. No words passed. There didn't need to be. Sophia turned to one of her aides and said quietly, "Mark the time. This will be in every history book from here to the Eastern Gate." Omega let out a low, approving huff and nudged Clara's knee with his muzzle. She reached down and scratched behind his ear, just once, before raising her chin. Gunner stepped back from the stone. Darren, watching from the edge of the gathering, crossed his arms and gave a short nod, then muttered to himself, "Hell of a foundation. Now let's see if it holds." The ceremony dispersed in reverent silence. There were no cheers, no horns, just the soft scuff of boots, the rustle of cloaks, and a lingering stillness that no one wanted to be the first to break. Bit by bit, the crowd filtered back toward the camp. Wolves padded down the path in pairs, echo soldiers rubbed tired eyes, and elven scribes quietly logged every rune that still shimmered across the cornerstone. The horizon was just beginning to warm, a faint blush of peach brushing the edge of the world. They had been up all night. Now they would sleep, or try to. Mylorian stood at the edge of the clearing, hands clasped behind his back. His gaze swept the ridge, then lingered. Gunner and Aeliana were walking together, just beyond the lantern light, side by side. Quiet. A familiar rhythm between them, even in silence. He watched as Gunner tipped his head toward her, saying something Mylorian couldn't hear. She answered with a tilt of her own, serious, then softer. They didn't touch. They didn't linger. But they walked like two people tethered to something stronger than blood or vow. Mylorian did not interrupt. He simply stood there, alone beneath the fading stars, and thought of all the wars he had witnessed, all the loves he had buried, and how hard it must be to resist something so rare. He closed his eyes. "And still they fight it," he murmured to himself. The wind stirred the edge of his cloak. Then he turned and walked back into the night.